Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to answer a question that I see asked a lot is which Helix is the right model for me? Also with the new Pod Go coming out, how does that factor in, to the decision of which unit to choose? So I know this question has been asked a lot and there have been people that have answered it in videos, but I just want to put my own spin on it and let you know what I think. The units I happen to own are the HX Stomp, the Pod Go, and the HX Floor. So I'll primarily be focusing on comparing those, but it should give you a pretty good sense of overall which unit is going to be right for you. So let's jump right into it. So to start out with, I want to talk about the kind of the least expensive entry-level unit, also the newest unit to come out, and that is the Pod Go. It's a very compact unit. I love the fact it's got a little grab handle built into the back, just a nice little touch, but solid unit, expression pedal, lots of foot switches. You can add another expression or another couple of foot switches if you'd like with all the expression outs. You have your effects loop, your stereo outs, your guitar in, your headphone out. It also works as a USB audio interface. So really great unit. I've got some notes on pros and cons for each of these units. So I'm just going to kind of talk about each one. And in the end, I'll probably go back and just do a quick summary of comparing them. But the nice thing about the Pod Go, so like I said, it's the lowest cost unit. It's $449. It's really straightforward, really easy to use. That's one of the reasons they went with the Pod naming or branding versus Helix is that, the old Pods, you just plugged them in, turn the knobs to what you wanted and you went with it. That's kind of the thinking behind this unit. So not a lot of tweaking required. For what it is, you got a lot of hardware control. You have the expression pedal with the toe switch. So essentially you have expression pedal 1 and 2 built into the unit. You have 6-foot switches available to control, either 6 stomps, or you can set up parameters to be controlled into 2 different states. Also, you have 4 snapshots you can assign, which gives it a ton of flexibility. Really a lot of flexibility there. And the other thing too is, $449 is such an aggressive and amazing price point for the tones, because you do get true Helix tones out of this thing. It uses the same algorithms that all the Helix line uses. So there's a couple of effects that didn't quite make the cut because of DSP usages, but you get 99% of everything that's in Helix, and it sounds like the Helix. It's an audio interface. As I mentioned before, you can add an external expression pedal, or with a tip ring sleeve jack, you can add an additional 2 foot switches. For instance, the Mission Engineering TT2 works great. I have one of those. I used it in one of my other videos to add foot switches 7 and 8. Lightweight effects loop. You can do the 4 cable method with it. You have a semi-fixed signal path that gives you 4 freely assignable blocks. So kind of look at that as a pro and a con. The pro of the kind of simplified signal path is it kind of helps you get up and going. It's not as intricate of a setup process. You have a volume wah, amp and cab block, effects loop block, and an EQ block that is in every preset. Then you have 4 blocks that you can do whatever with. You can look at it as a con in that you only have 4 freely assignable blocks. Just depends on how you look at it. And as we get to the bigger Helix Floor model, we'll talk about all the flexibility you have there. If you want to assign tons and tons of blocks, you can do that. So another one of the cons, if you will, it does not have, the ability to run dual paths or complex routing. Again, this could fall under the pro. It just depends on how you look at it, because it's not designed to be complicated and have all these, where you have to draw schematics and figure out where your signal's going. So again, just apples and oranges. It's not designed to do those more complicated things that the other Helix models do. There's no MIDI. I say that, with a caveat. You can use MIDI to change presets on this over USB, but it doesn't send MIDI commands and controls as the other Helix models do. So you can't use like an external MIDI controller or foot switch with it. If you're a Variax guy, it does not have the VDI input, so you can't use the Variax cable. You just have to use a standard 1/4 inch. Of course, not as much DSP power as the other units in the Helix line. The only time I've ever run into any kind of limitation is when I had everything filled up, I guess some more intensive DSP blocks, When I got to the reverb, some reverbs were available. Some of the more heavy DSP intensive reverbs were not available unless I changed other parts of the path. But I think I've had that happen like once, and it was very easy remedy. I was trying to just make a Swiss Army knife patch, so there was a lot of stuff going on. But in the end, the way they've designed that semi-fixed signal chain, very, very rarely are you going to run into any kind of DSP limitations. The only other thing I'll mention, and this is speculation on my part, I don't know what the firmware upgrade path is in terms of when Helix gets new models and new features, how much of that is going to trickle down to Pod Go. Purely speculation on my part, and all I'm saying is I don't know. It hasn't really been, at least from what I've seen, it hasn't been talked about specifically, whereas everything else in the Helix line, kind of, the firmware path is identical. Whenever one gets something, they all get it. Don't know how that's going to push down to Pod Go. I imagine it likely will continue to add as the Helix line adds, but just something to think about. Again, at $449. It's an amazing value for the money. 10 years ago when the HD 500 came out, it was at a $499 price point, and adjusted for inflation, I mean, that the Pod Go is just launching at a really, really aggressive price point, which is, I've just been blown away, just to be honest, just throw my own personal opinion in. I've been blown away by the Pod Go. It's been so much fun. I actually haven't plugged in my big Helix since I got it. Part of it is, that new toy kind of syndrome or whatever, honeymoon period with it. But it kind of does what I need it to do. And through the audio interface, I can send a dry signal out for recording. So, man, if you're on a budget, I think this thing's a no-brainer. Love it. So that's the Pod Go. Okay, next on the list is the HX Stomp. This is by far the smallest unit in the line, and in my opinion, probably the coolest designed unit. I mean, when you actually, it's one thing to see pictures, but when you actually hold one in your hand and feel how light it is, and then you just see all the ins and outs and the foot switches. I mean, there's no fat on this thing. Like everything that could be used, surface area. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know about the inside, but I'm just assuming every little square millimeter of this thing is being used for something. So it's really amazing in that respect. As far as how it compares, it's a little more expensive than the Pod Go. It's selling for $599. The pros, it is extremely, again, compact, lightweight, same core software as all the Helix line. So you get, the upgrades will always be in sync with each other. Everything on one is on the other. All of the blocks are freely assignable. Currently, you're limited to 6 blocks. Based on what I've read online and heard, when firmware version 3.0 does come out, don't know when it's going to be. Maybe if you're watching this sometime in the future, maybe it's already out. But that block count is supposed to be increased to 8. So you will gain 2 more blocks that way, which I think is a big deal for something like HX Stomp. It is MIDI capable. It integrates really well with pedal boards. That's what it was designed for, hence the name HX Stomp. It wasn't really designed to be, this all-in-one, control everything in one unit type of thing like the Helix or even the Pod Go. It really was designed to be incorporated into pedal boards. You can see that with, you've got the effects loop. You can add expression pedals or foot switches. It has MIDI, which a lot of guys I've seen have added something like the Morningstar MIDI controller to give them 6 more foot switches. So there's a lot of flexibility there. You can run the 4-cable method. You can put your pedals in front or any place in the signal chain with the effects loop or after. It is also an audio interface, works quite well for that. The foot switches are capacitive, just like on Helix. It can also be used with certain 9-volt power supplies, so depending on how you are powering your pedal board, there are some options there if you don't want to use the standard power supply that comes with it. I don't look into that yourself if you're going to do that. I'm not an expert on what power supplies work best, so I don't want to throw anything out there that without it being what I know is going to work. But I know I've talked to guys that do it. There are options out there. Works with HX Edit, just like all the other units in the Helix line does. So it's just super flexible. 1.75 pounds. It's pretty crazy. So the other thing that I thought about too, when you're thinking, the first thing on the list of cons is the 6 block limitation. One thing I did think about though, also it does have 3 snapshots. I don't think I mentioned that before. So you do have the snapshot functionality. You can get a license for Helix Native, which is the software plug-in version of Helix, for $99 now with ownership of any Helix product. So what that means is if you have Helix Stomp or HX Stomp and it's incorporated in your pedal board, but you also use it at home for recording, for $99, you can add Helix Native as a plugin and have access to everything Helix can do. You can set Native to where whatever your computer can handle, it'll do. There's no DSP limitations like there would be with the hardware. So that is one thing to think about. If you are going to be doing a lot of recording, you do have access, because Helix Native on its own is $399. So being able to pick that up for $99 is something to think about if you do a lot of recording, and does add some flexibility to the HX Stomp. So other cons, again, depending on how you look at it, limited foot switches. You have 3 foot switches. You're limited to 3 snapshots, 6 blocks. So in my mind, it's not really suited for just a standalone unit to go play live with. And I say that with an asterisk. If you are very straightforward and you might have 2 stomps and you're good with that, and with a tuner and a tap tempo, or maybe you can just get by, set it up for 3 snapshots, it can work. I've done gigs with it. But you just kind of have to think ahead and figure some things out. You don't have the flexibility of having a lot of immediate control with your feet. But it sounds amazing, works great live. But did want to mention that it wasn't designed to be this standalone, million foot switches and scribble strips and expression pedals. It is what the name implies, a stomp box. Also, for you Variax guys, no VDI support. Don't know where they would have crammed it in, so not a fault of the unit, but just mentioning that for any of you guys that do play Variax, you can't plug the digital cable in. Again, just like the Pod Go, you would use the 1/4 inch standard guitar cable. So that's basically the HX Stomp. Okay, now for the top of the line, this is the HX Floor, or Helix Floor, I should say. This is the biggest, most robust unit. I'm actually gonna set it down because, as I will mention in the cons, it's a little bit heavy and bulky. It's amazing that how far technology has come, because the fact I'm picking up a floor pedal that will have just virtually unlimited amounts of tones in it through amps, effects, and all this. I'm able to just pick it up and I can put it in a backpack and go, but yet I'm going, oh, this is big and bulky. I used to carry racks and 4x12s and multiple guitars to gigs, so when I say the Helix Floor is big and bulky, it's very relative. I'm just comparing them to the Pod Go and the HX Stomp. But anyway, let me kind of talk about what the Helix Floor has. It's been out for a while, so most of you probably know this, but it's got, basically every bell and whistle you can think of. There are 2 DSP chips, which means you have 2 paths, gives you a lot of flexibility and horsepower. You can run dual amps, multiple amps, cabs, IRs, tons of routing flexibility. I could spend the rest of the video just talking about routing. And if you look back on my channel, I've got a lot of routing videos up to kind of show you, because there's a lot you can do with it. 4 effects loops. If you're looking at the Helix LT, there's only 2. It does have the VDI input for you Variax guys out there, and you can control and edit Workbench through that. The Floor model has a microphone input and a microphone preamp. The LT doesn't. The Floor model has the scribble strips, which for someone like me that is ADD and has a hard time remembering what's what and how I program what, the scribble strips, I've become so addicted to those things. Basically, if you don't know, that's just a little LCD above each foot switch where it'll tell you what's set up there. When you switch to snapshot mode, whatever you name the snapshot, when you're in stomp mode, whatever the stomp is, or what you can custom name stuff. Has capacitive foot switches, meaning you can touch a foot switch and whatever is assigned to that foot switch will become active for editing. Built-in expression pedal, you can control, if you have a physical tube amp that has a foot switch jack, you can actually use Helix to change channels on that. It is an audio interface, of course, has MIDI. It has also, I'll just sound this out, SPDIF and AES/EBU connections. I don't know if SPDIF's the way you say that, but those are both digital protocols that it has. The cool thing about the AES connection is you can use Line 6 Link with that. Line 6 Link will allow you to interface with the Power Cab series, the DT line of amplifiers, or the stage source speakers. And not only does it pass audio over one cable, it also passes control. So you can do things like if you have a power cab, you can, when you change snapshots, you can change the speaker modeling or the preset, or turn on and off the, like you can go from full range to speaker modeling on the power cab using the Line 6 Link to control that. So a lot of flexibility there. I would say still to this day, the Helix has the most friendly and intuitive user interface. You have a large color screen, brilliantly designed user interface. I think the Helix has been out now since late 2015, and in my opinion, no one's come up with anything better. So hats off to the design team. They did a fantastic job with that. Has MIDI with the new firmware, the command center or control center where you can set up different MIDI commands and kind of, before you had to have this in stomp mode to do stomp, snapshot mode did that, but now you can kind of do any, you can mix and match and put looper controls in any view. You kind of have to get into using a Helix for that to make a lot of sense, I guess, but it's a really cool feature. They added a lot of flexibility. You can kind of, what that means is you can set up the foot switches, do anything you want in about any mode. Same with the HX Stomp. Native can be purchased for $99 if you own one. Again, it would be a $399 purchase if you didn't, so that's pretty cool. The cons, again, like I mentioned, it's bigger and heavier. You pick up the HX Stomp and then pick it up, you go, yeah, it's big, it's heavy, but it does a lot of stuff. It's got a lot of foot switches. There's a lot going on under the hood. It's also the most expensive Helix. The Helix Floor is selling for $1699. I believe the LT model is $1299. Price is relative as to what you find expensive. If you buy a tube amp and a pedal board, I mean, you're going to eclipse $1699 quickly if you're looking at, the higher end, vintage tube amps, or, a full, a whole, when I say vintage, or just like an amp that's a full tube amp, tube path, maybe hand wired stuff, true bypass pedals, like a pedal train to put all your pedals on, a power supply, it adds up really quickly. So, $1699, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, if you break down, the cost of what it would take to replicate what Helix does, it's actually not a lot of money for what it does. But did want to point that out. It is, the Helix Floor is the most expensive piece of kit with the Helix name on it that's out there. So with all that rambling out of the way and going over features that what each one of them can do, I'll just give you my personal feeling on maybe what I would recommend. So if you're on a budget, in my opinion, no question, the Podgo is amazing. If I were starting over, and again, budget was a consideration, I would grab a Podgo in a second. I think it is amazing. I think for live use, it may, specifically at the sub $1,000 level, I think for live use, the Podgo is probably, in my opinion, the best option, because it already has so much of the foot switch accessibility, with having 6 foot switches and the expression pedal built in. Again, I'm not a pedal board guy in terms of, I don't have a lot of external pedals, and again, the Stomp was designed for that. So as a standalone live unit, I definitely recommend the Podgo if you're wanting to spend less than $1,000. If you want something that's straightforward but still has a lot of flexibility, I would recommend the Podgo. It's an audio interface, so you have that aspect of it. So you can also, meaning that you can record with it directly. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, you can record the dry signal. So if you want to do reamping and stuff like that, you can do it. It has all the tones of Helix. It's really easy to use, convenient package, lightweight, grab and go. I love the thing. I'm blown away by what it does for the price point. For me, I tend to think more in terms of how things work in a live situation, because up until the Corona COVID lockdown, I played live a lot. So I tend to think about how things are going to work in a live environment. For me, the Stomp was not quite as appealing as the Podgo for that particular application. Again, I don't have a pedal board to incorporate the Stomp with. So when I say live, what I mean is you take just that unit and that's it. So keep that in mind as I say that, because for people that have a pedal board, it's a whole different scenario. If you want, a full Helix product, if you want something that's always going to have the same models, the same firmware, everything's going to be in sync with the Helix line, Stomp is an amazing way to go. Super compact. It'll fit in a gig bag. If you're just going for a quick jam or a rehearsal or even gigs, like I said, if you kind of think ahead about how to set your patches up, you can definitely gig with it. You can grab your gig bag with the guitar, put the Stomp in the pocket, and it's crazy how small it is. Again, you have access to Helix Native for $99. You can expand that way. If you want to do anything MIDI wise, you have more ins and outs and controls that way. So as far as the lower end, neither one of these units are lower end, but the sub $1,000 price point, I would say if you want a standalone, Pod Go. If you want something that incorporates into your current rig, HX Stomp may be a better way to go about doing that. Now, when would I justify, going over and spending the $16.99 for the Helix Floor? I would say unless you need something compact, and unless you just can't afford it, I mean, the Helix Floor to me is a no-brainer. It's been hands down the best piece of gear I've maybe ever bought. I mean, it just is amazing. It does everything. It's super flexible. It's a great recording interface. You can record vocals with it. It has a mic pre on it. I can run my Variax through it. The ability to have 8 snapshots, 10 stomps at one time, the scribble strips, the built-in expression pedal, all the external, the 4 effects loops, and it just does everything. It's really, really amazing. So basically, my personal feeling is Helix Floor is what it is. It's the Cadillac. It's the top of the line. Unless I'm just wanting something smaller and compact, or for whatever reason don't want to spend the money or don't have the money to spend, then I'd go in a different direction. But for me, the Helix Floor is just crazy good. I mean, it's here we are, almost 5 years after its release, and it still holds up with anything on the market. Does so extremely well. So I hope that's helpful. The answer to this question, along with almost every other question in life, is it depends. Depends on how much money you want to spend. Depends on where you're going to be using it, how you're going to be using it. But I hope this helped to clarify a little bit, if you are in the market for one of these units, which one might suit your needs and your budget the best. So let me know down below if there are questions I didn't answer. I'll be happy to address those in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I always do appreciate the interaction with you guys with the comments, so keep those coming. I always appreciate you guys checking out the videos, and we'll see you in the next one.